Well, hello and welcome to the Photo Brigade podcast. I'm Robert Kaplan. I am with my friend and first photo editor at the New York Times, Kevin Larkin. How you doing?
Good.
Kevin is a freelancer these days, but back when I was an intern, back in 2005, you were my assignment editor, waking me up 7:30 in the morning, sending me to random assignments. So I thank you for that, giving me my first opportunities. So welcome, Kevin.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So this is actually our first time we're going to be doing a Facebook Live. So apparently right now we are live on Facebook, which is exciting. So if you are watching live, we have someone monitoring the comments. If you'd like to comment, I'll try to ask a question. There's a bug in here. I'm going to have to kill it eventually.
That'll get you comments.
Yeah, there it is. Okay. So also, we're here live at Adorama, their event space. I just want to say thanks to Adorama and also to Canon Professional Services for their help and support. So with no further ado, back to you, Kevin. I want to talk about your background and career because you're a shooter, an editor. You lived in New York City for years, and then you moved to Abu Dhabi and helped start up a newspaper there, The National. So I'd like to maybe start, and also you're big into sailing. That's why we have the sailing photo behind you right now. But I kind of want to start with maybe just a little background. If you can give me a little background with how you got into the photo industry, how you got to New York and ended up where you are.
Well, I mean, I guess it's the usual route. I mean, I was, photographer at the high school yearbook, and then, in college, I was a photographer at the college newspaper, then photo editor.
Everybody does the high school yearbook or newspaper or something.
Well, I mean, that's where you first get serious about it. I mean, that's where you start thinking, before I decided to be a photographer, I was going to be an ocean engineer, and I was doing all the AP drafting classes and things like that.
Right.
And it wasn't until we had like a career day at high school. And by then, I'd been taking pictures since I was about 10. So I'd always had a camera. I'd always been out taking photographs. But you never thought that, you can make a career out of this.
Yep.
Because there was nobody to guide you. You didn't know professional photographers.
Right.
And then there was a career day at my high school, and there was a professional photographer. And, talked to him, and it was like, wow, this is actual possible to do.
Really? So the high school career day is kind of what set you on your path?
Exactly, yeah. Much to my father's chagrin. And he really had his heart set on me being an engineer.
Oh, really?
And the day I told him I decided to be a professional photographer, I'll never forget his reaction, which was, I never should have bought you that goddamn darkroom. And then, college, it was a college newspaper. It was...
Where'd you go to college?
Arizona State University.
Arizona State.
Yeah.
So are you from that area?
No, I'm actually an Army brat.
Okay.
I kind of grew up in several places in the United States. The last place my father was based was Hawaii, so I grew up in Hawaii.
Oh, cool, yeah.
And that's actually when I started taking pictures. We were on a family vacation, but my mother didn't want to take pictures. So she gave me her little Instamatic, and that's really when I started taking, the first time I ever had a camera in my hand.
Awesome.
Probably like 9 or 10 years old.
So then you went, so let's get to where you were then freelanced for 10 years, a decade or so?
Yeah, I was, after college, I moved, I had intended to move to Southeast Asia. My goal was to go to Vietnam and try to be a freelancer there. En route, I was riding motorcycles with friends of mine up through Thailand, and we were involved in a head-on collision with a truck.
Oh, wow.
And which I should have died, but I didn't. But I seriously injured one of my legs.
Goodness gracious.
And ended up laid up, and I got shipped back to the States to recover, so that kind of ended that part of it. And so I was back in Virginia and once I was recovered enough and actually get some money to buy a new camera, I started freelancing for the Washington Post, a little outfit called Photo Press, and then eventually Agence France Press. Ended up getting my own independent White House credential, so I was able to
freelance for whoever. Once you have a hard pass or whatever.
Once you got a White House credential, you can basically work for anybody in the White House.
So we don't have any of your old photos. Perhaps,
no, unfortunately.
Perhaps when we edit this for YouTube, maybe you can find a few more and we can put them in, but maybe not. I don't know if they're...
Well, they're all in a Foot Locker.
Yeah,
they haven't been scanned, so...
Never mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's cool.
Yeah, and then, I was at AFP for a while, and then unfortunately, my parents died about that period,
Uh-huh.
and I was engaged to a woman, and she was from New York, and it was like, well, let's get the hell out of D.C.
Uh-huh.
And so we moved back to New York, and I started freelancing started off trying to do some work from Sigma, but I wasn't happy with that, and then ended up freelancing for AP, and I freelanced for them, up till about 97.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you made your transition, and I'm going to go ahead and pop on over here. You made your transition to the New York Times.
Yeah, I started off as a freelance editor in the sports department.
Uh-huh.
And so I was there for, I don't know, about a year or two, and then I started rotating around the desk. And then in 2000, I was hired full-time staff.
And so what we have here is we're going to go through a handful of the clips from the New York Times pages that you've worked on. These aren't necessarily your photos, but they're
Yeah, they're not my photos.
They're
These
not your
are
photos at all.
Staff or freelancer.
Staff or freelance photos. But you also were part of the team that won Pulitzers for their coverage of
Yes,
9/11.
I was part of both teams that won the 2 Pulitzer Prizes.
Can you tell me about that, working on these different projects, what it's like? Were you involved in the design of these pages?
Well, for the escape section, my biggest involvement was getting the story from the writer and then visualizing what I wanted done and then hiring the right photographers. I'm very fortunate as that through my career, for various reasons, I know a wide array of photographers, and I mean really good people.
Yeah.
And so I was always able to handpick the people that I wanted to do, especially with escapes, the jobs that I wanted to do.
Were you at Escapes before or after the assignment desk?
After. It was
Okay.
my last year at the Times.
Okay.
I was on the escapes desk. And so I was, that was an opportunity where you could sit there and think about, okay, here's the story, these are the pictures, who do I know who can execute this in the way I want it to be done? And like I said, I'm very fortunate. I know some very talented people. And so I could just call them up, and our budget was fairly unlimited then. I could sit there and say, go spend 3 or 4 days and do this, and this
Yeah.
is what I have. And they usually exceeded, my original idea. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
great when you have people like that.
Well, the escape section is exciting because it's more adventure involved in most of the assignments.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
Metro. You work for the Metro, and it was. I mean, I always worked with you on the Metro section and locally here in New York, and every day is a new adventure for sure. But there's
Mhm.
something about going out and having an adventure on
Yeah,
an assignment
yeah.
like that. So also what's really neat, I've never been an editor. I've never been on the other end of the call where I'm calling someone to give them an assignment. But that's quite a ability to, it's something that a lot of photographers really want to buddy up to you, want to make sure to be in, your Rolodex. And,
Yeah, I mean, the hardest time for that was when I was on the assignment desk, because everybody wanted to be your friend.
Right.
And it got to the point where I couldn't go to gallery opens or parties.
Really?
I was
because the photo industry things, yeah, because they all...
Well, because everybody, as soon as they find out who you are, they, you get surrounded by people, and they're like, how do you get in? And I mean, I was at a Christmas party at the Puck Building, having a drink with Les Stone, and we're sitting at the bar, and all of a sudden I hear this screeching voice from out of nowhere going, Kevin Larkin's here, where the fuck is he? I want to talk to this guy. And, sure enough, and, Les looked at me and goes, oh, that's for you. And he walked away and left me, and this drunk chick showed up and started berating me.
Oh, man.
Because, I turned her portfolio down. I wouldn't even interview her as a freelancer.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't, you're not trying to be mean, but you're getting dozens and dozens of books every week.
Yeah.
And you have to go through them and say, and you have limited time because, Simon asks, you're putting out 50 to 70 assignments a day. You got to plan stuff out weeks in advance. You got to go to meetings.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to put an hour or two a week where I could review portfolios, and if I like someone, I'd bring them in. And if,
So you would look at different. I mean, that is a good question. I mean, since we're on here, what is the best way to approach a photo editor to get on in their Rolodex in such a situation? To not come across as too pushy. Not, is it sending a digital portfolio? Is it sending a real portfolio? Is it meeting in person?
Well, I think first of all you got to figure out how you want to present yourself. If you're heavy into digital, and let's face it, being digital today is really the way to be.
Right.
I wouldn't send today, and I don't, because I'm looking for a job at the moment. I don't send out paper portfolios. I mean, everything I do, I have a website. I send a link to my website, my portfolio online.
Right.
But even if it's a cold call, even if there's not a job that's open and it's a place you want to work at, there's no harm sending a well-written email, but make sure it's well-written.
Right.
It's grammatically correct.
Not
It's,
obviously a canned email with the replacing of names and publications.
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
that.
And, and send a link to your portfolio. If the person has time and if they're interested, they'll look at it.
Right.
If they're not, they won't. It doesn't hurt. Another great way to do it is, go to the photo community events. National Press Photographers always has an annual convention.
Mm-hmm.
They do short courses. They do regional courses. It's always a great way to meet people who work in the industry in your area or in industries in the areas that you want to work in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always good to do that and, go up and talk to the people there, do portfolio reviews. I mean, I used to do a lot of, when I was at the Times, I would go to a lot of MPPA events and volunteer as a portfolio reviewer. And I would talk to people and I would look at their books. And if there was someone I liked, I would say, well, can I add you to our list? They might have been up in Syracuse, but we use people in Syracuse.
Right.
We use people all over the tri-state area.
Sure.
So, I'm going up there looking for talent.
Yeah.
As well as trying to give advice to people. So that's always a good way. Get involved in the photo community events that are around you. And social networking is a great way to meet people and try to, and you can talk to, you'll find editors there and say, or a photographer, ask them, who should I talk to? What's the best way for their newspaper or their magazine?
Right. So that's really great info. I want to jump back to the 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
So you were on the desk at that time.
Yeah, I was weekend Metro editor, I think, at that point, sharing it. Yeah, Lonnie Schlein was the weekly, and I was the weekend.
Okay. What was it like to be an editor at that point? I mean, when you such a intense, tragic event is going on, like what is what's going through your mind? Is it just like get as many people there to shoot? Is it safety? Is it?
Well, I wasn't on the day that it occurred.
Okay.
I came into the office later to see if I could help, but I was actually at home in Brooklyn when this happened, and my girlfriend at the time called me up and said, "You got to turn on the TV," and we're just like, "Jesus, what's going on?" And then it was trying to call into the office, see if we needed to get in, and then they shut the subways down. We couldn't get in.
Right.
But the overall experience was the most difficult thing I've ever been through, because every day, the intensity. Because we actually were putting out two sections. We had the regular Metro section, and then we had the special, section on 9/11.
Oh, right. Yeah, you guys actually created a new section just for that for a while.
Yeah, so we had to put two sections out every day. So you had to do, the general Metro stuff, and then you had to do the 9/11 stuff. And of course, the 9/11 stuff was shifting hour by hour, even days, weeks, months afterwards. And so, trying to keep up with it. I mean, the pressure was intense. Dealing with the photographs, looking at the pictures, dealing with the stories was horrendous experience for anybody.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I was going to ask you about, because I've spoken with another friend of mine who's a photo editor who was working with one of the agencies back then, and he was talking about how he had to go through counseling after seeing these raw takes of images, because obviously you can only publish so much gruesomeness on the front page of the New York Times or in any of the pages of the New York Times. Did that affect you?
Yeah, it affected me greatly. I mean, not only 9/11, but we had shortly, I think about a month afterwards, there was a suspected anthrax attack on the New York Times.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
So
yeah.
we were all quarantined onto our floor.
Oh,
and,
God.
at the time, I was joking with my colleagues. I was just like, yeah, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't scare me. But it really did. And, that night, I went to my local pub close to my house, and a friend of mine was a bartender, and I was really ready to pack it in. I mean, I was just like, that's it, I've had it. I mean, we had the plane crash a month later in the Rockaways. The United Airlines plane went down. Then we had the anthrax attack. And it was just like, just spinning out of control. I really was ready to pack it in. But I'm glad I didn't. I mean, I just made a decision, I was like, I'm not going to be chased out of my city. I'm not going to be chased out of my home. I'm just going to grind up and get through this and do the best I can. And that's what we ended up doing.
Right.
I think a lot of it was just automatic pilot. We're all just, you didn't have time to think about a lot of it. You were just nonstop from the minute you walked in the door to the minute you walked out. And we were working really long hours as well.
And so this is 2001, so that's like right at the cusp of digital. at that time too. So there's like, I'm trying to think of, when I remember so my story of 9/11 is I was a freshman in college. At the same time was my my visual communications 101 class, the main 150 people taught by the director of the school. And he basically had us all come in. He said, obviously, look at the news. Everyone leave right now. Watch history be made. Come tomorrow, and we'll look at all the front pages. So, these types of things, we all looked at all the different front pages, all the different coverage of these events. And I'm remembering back then, I had just switched I was the first student in my school to go digital. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that maybe the staff at that point, maybe some of them were digital and some of them weren't.
Most of them were still film, I believe. Because I remember when I got in that afternoon, I looked at a few photographers' takes, and it was still color neg.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what we were doing then was still color neg.
Right. Color negatives. And at that point, I remember you guys actually had a lab.
Yeah.
In the, which when I was done, a few years after I was done as an intern, you guys got rid of that because it all turned digital those days. But, okay, yeah. So anyway, let's maybe get off that subject. It's a downer. But it's really awesome opportunity to meet a lot of people. You met tons of people in the industry through working as an editor at the Times, and you got to work with an amazing staff of photographers.
Yeah, you get to work with some of the best people in the industry.
Yeah, really cool. All right, so let's move on now. So you then, in 2008, all of a sudden I see on Facebook or whatever, well, I'm headed to Abu Dhabi and I'm taking on a job at the National, which was a startup at that point.
Right.
And can you tell me about that? What was the decision making? Why did you decide? Did they court you?
Well, a friend of mine I knew had become the director of photography, and he was looking for people. And I was, I'd spent 12 years at the Times at that point, and it just felt like I wasn't going to move up. I was just going to rotate around.
Right, desk to desk. That's what happens there, is editors go from one desk to another.
Yeah.
And those who aren't in the journalism world that are watching, the New York Times has the sports desk, the Metro desk, the arts desk, this desk, and there's like 20. There's like a bunch of them.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many are left since I've left. I mean, I don't think the escape section is still there.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
I think that died about a year after I left.
Yeah.
So, I'm on the escape section, which is a very light feature page, and I've always been a hard news guy. And just like, well, is this going to be my future? I mean, I can stay another 8 years, or until I retire or they buy me out. But
right.
I didn't want to sit around and do nothing. I like to work and I like challenges. And so this opportunity came up to move to the Middle East, a place I've always been fascinated by. I've always wanted to work overseas. Mm-hmm. And also launch a newspaper. I mean, in 2008, how many newspapers were opening up in the world? Probably not many.
Yeah, that was, I remember it being like, oh yeah, well of course there's job openings and newspapers happening in the Middle East. It's not happening in America. Everyone's losing their jobs in America.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it was an opportunity, and I saw it as a challenge. One, to live in the Middle East. Two, help launch a newspaper into a region that wasn't very well known for, having open journalistic endeavors.
Was that difficult? Did you find that being a problem working there?
Well, it became a problem, not quite right away, but eventually it became a problem. When I was offered the job, the idea, the word that was going around from everybody is, this is going to be the New York Times of the Middle East, and that's what we were promised.
Right.
Didn't quite work out that way, unfortunately. And after about the first year, started really cracking down on the things that we were doing and things we were writing. Our managing editor, who was British, left, and they brought in a Lebanese guy who was much more susceptible to the pressure from our Arab. We were owned by the government, so.
Oh, okay, right.
And it got to the point where they really just started cracking down on us, to the point where during the Arab Spring, we weren't even allowed, initially, they wouldn't allow us to report on the fact that there were riots in Bahrain.
Oh, wow.
Which is only 90 miles away from us.
Huh.
The UAE had military and police forces there, but we weren't allowed to report it. And we're talking, well, it's on CNN. It's
right.
not like
it's on CNN, and it's like local, basically.
Yeah, so it came back that, okay, you can cover it, but don't mention that the UAE is involved in any way. It's like, okay, so we were able to send a photographer there for a few days and get some photographs, but it just got progressively worse from there. I would say the middle of the Arab, the beginning, after the first couple months of the Arab Spring, between the budget and, the government wanted to control more and more of the content, is when they really started shutting us down.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you ended up lasting about 5 years there.
Yeah. I was there 5.5 years.
5.5 years. And then
more or less.
You moved to Dubai.
No, I moved to Dubai after the first year. I was still working at the National. I was commuting back and forth.
Okay.
But I moved to Dubai because the property values in Abu Dhabi were going through the roof. Dubai was in a recession. The property values went down through the floor. So I ended up with this great apartment for next to nothing for a couple of years.
Cool.
And I also moved to Dubai because, as you mentioned, I'm a sailor.
And which is why we have these sailing photos. So while we talk,
none of these are my boats, by the way.
I wish, that'd be something, wouldn't it? So I'm just going to blaze through some of these photos while you talk, since we mentioned sailing.
Yeah, I mean, Dubai has a much better sailing community than Abu Dhabi does. And they had a club there called the Dubai Offshore Sailing Club, which I joined. A friend of mine who was my sailing instructor became an instructor there. So I got involved with the club and, got involved with a lot of the racing and so forth.
And were you taking photos, or like these photos that we're looking at, is this just fun photos, or were you actually on assignment? Or?
No, this was a self-assignment. These are 66-foot traditional racing dhows. This is called the Al Ghafal race, and it's an annual race that the Dubai government puts on. And there's hundreds of these boats line up early in the morning. It's a 50-mile race for a tiny little island out in the Arabian Gulf all the way back to Dubai. And I just self-assigned myself to it. I, called up the media office, got credentials, and they took me out on one of the boats, spent 2 nights out there, anchored off the island, and then put me on a rib, and I ribbed a tiny little rib for 50 miles, just photographing everything. Now this is a race I was actually in. This is the Dubai Muscat race, which is about a 4-day race up to Muscat in Oman. And this is my friend's boat, Talitha, which is a great boat, and it's one of my favorite photographs.
Looks amazing. And
well, this is just, I started getting into photographing the regattas for the club. They hold 2 big regattas and a bunch of different races throughout the year. And so I just got involved with doing that.
Very cool. And playing with some GoPros.
Well, I'm actually on that boat.
Oh, okay.
This is actually the same race. This is Dubai Muscat, but I'm down in the cabin. I didn't want to be in the photo.
So when you're in these races, are you actually you're working the, I don't even know, working the pole? I don't know what the word is.
Well, yeah, you're working. I mean, we do depending on the size of the crew, but we usually do a 4-hour shift. So you're 4 hours on deck, you're 4 hours off deck.
Oh, okay.
And so you can be up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're sailing the boat. I mean, there's no engine. So you're sailing the boat as best you can, and depending on what comes up. I mean, I've been hit by I've done it twice. The first time I got hit by a shamal, and it's about 60, 70 miles of wind came through in the middle, right before dawn, blew us way off course, almost threw us around. And the second time, we had, I think the night before we reached Muscat, we had, 30 knots of wind coming across the deck, and so you're sitting on the rail, trying to keep the weight of the boat down and getting splashed and rained on and so on.
Right. So and then another thing I've noticed is that on Facebook you were living on a boat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you? I mean,
well, when I left the National, I didn't want to leave the UAE. I didn't want to leave Dubai. I liked living there, and I felt like I hadn't seen and done all the things that I wanted to do. So I decided that I was going to go back and become a freelance photographer and open up my own freelance business. The only way I could do that is if I didn't have to pay rent on an apartment, because by then they were coming out of the recession, the property values were getting high again, and I'd always wanted to live on a boat. So a friend of mine turned me onto this boat that I ended up buying. It was a Jeanneau Sunshine 36, and I bought that probably about 4 years ago. And I spent 6 months refurbishing it, and then I moved on and lived on it for 3.5 years.
So did it end up being like you ended up saving enough money? I mean, to me it sounds like it's going to be more expensive, owning a boat and living on it and restoring it than it would renting an apartment.
No, not really. I mean, I bought the boat for, I guess about $82,000 US. And if I was paying rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in Dubai at the time, it probably would have cost me $20,000 to $30,000 a year. So in 3 years, I was actually ahead in terms of the value of the boat over what I would have been paying in rent.
And you have that equity in it and everything.
Yeah,
which is
and
nice.
plus I didn't have to pay for utilities. I didn't have to pay the municipality fee, which was an unwritten tax that was into the system. Living on the boat, I mean, because I was a member of the club, I got a very cheap mooring fee.
Right.
So it got to a point where my monthly living expense was probably about $300 a month between rent, insurance, and all that, membership in the club.
Yeah.
So
that's exciting though. I've always thought how cool that would be just to have your own boat. How did you always kept it in one place? Did you ever say, I'm just going to take it and live?
Well, no, I never took it anywhere to go live anywhere else. We took it out, like
just
weekends.
Took it out. Okay.
We'd go out and sail 4 hours away and then pull into a bay, drop the hook, spend the night, fire up the grill some steaks, drink some wine.
That sounds so cool. I'm sorry, that sounds really cool. I want to do that. I went to Menorca on my honeymoon in Spain, and there are these like cove beaches that you can only get to by hiking, except unless you have a boat. So you'd see these like beautiful, sailboats just slide up, drop, and the people just swim to shore.
Well, it's like that in Turkey and Greece. I did. A buddy of mine did a couple charters. We did a 2-week charter in Greece. So we sailed all the way from Athens to Mykonos and back, and then we did a 2-week charter out of Turkey along the Carian coast. And there's the same thing. There's lots of little islands. There's lots of little coves. There's just nobody there, and you just go and drop the anchor, and you're completely by yourself.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
amazing. So I want to then also get into some of the other work that you've done while you were abroad, and there are a couple mixed in at the end, some sports photos from before you left, way back. Not very high resolution either, but we'll show a couple of them. But you've done some stories on bullfighting.
Yep.
Which is, I've never seen bullfighting like this actually. I was expecting when I saw the folder, like Spanish.
This is Emirati bullfighting, and the idea is you put the two bulls in the ring together, and they try to push each other outside the ring, and whichever one gets.
It's kind of like bull sumo wrestling or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're gonna maul each other to death or anything
no.
like that. Well, that's good at least, but still, rather crazy.
Oh, it's fun to watch.
Yeah, and then just general feature photos from around the Middle East, I suppose here.
Yeah, well, these were on assignment actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was working for the American Business Council in Dubai, and they needed new photographs for their membership directory. This was on my own. This is camel racing training out in the desert on a lane. This is in Rhodes, Greece.
So you do have some travel. You've done a lot of travel.
I've done a lot of travel, yeah.
And this is
This is in Muscat. This is one of the roundabouts in Dubai.
And then some nature. You've been doing.
Well, this is British Columbia. I was out last summer. I was visiting friends who live on Vancouver Island, and they took me on a whale watching expedition.
Yeah.
And so, we just happened to see this, and
Cool.
this is part of my travel stuff.
Yeah.
This is the Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Abu Dhabi. And I was on an assignment photographing a triathlon in this little enclave on the east coast called Corfacan. And while I was waiting for the bikes and the runners, I saw
little feature
stuff.
Yeah.
This is Scotland.
I went to Scotland on a school field study thing. We did a 5 weeks in Scotland for Ohio University. It was really cool.
Yeah.
So recognize that. And then air shows.
Yeah, I mean, I was shooting a lot of stock for myself and for agencies. So when I wasn't on a commercial job, I would go and look for things to shoot on my own. I mean, the beauty about the way I'd set up my business, it didn't work out, unfortunately, in the end because of the recession that came on suddenly. But this is actually my marina. This is where I lived. I only needed to work 10 days a month. And if I could work between 5 to 10 days a month, I covered all my bills and everything, and then I was free to do whatever I wanted to do. A lot of the time was spent working on the boat or sailing, but I would always try to get out and shoot stuff on my own.
And I also noticed that, so do you also, you sent me some Photo Shelter links, and do you use Photo Shelter to sell prints and things like that?
No, I just have them contact me through that.
That's just your main kind of hub at this point.
Yeah,
Is this Marrakesh?
That's Marrakesh.
Yeah.
Great place.
What a crazy place.
I loved it.
I spent 3 days in Marrakesh, and it was just like, I don't know. I can't even explain it. It's just the pictures just make themselves there. The light, the people, all of this is like haze from the motorbikes, the exhaust.
Yeah. Well, this is early in the morning walking through the Medina, and I just turned around and there was this, there it was, and I got one frame off. And,
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Did you stay at like a little riad?
Yeah, we stayed at a nice little riad there.
So what's neat about this kind of picture this is
well, I forget what the Hipstamatic.
Hipstamatic.
Yeah, this is in Cairo.
This is in Cairo. Okay. Well,
I went to Cairo and I wanted to make, a photo that had like an antique feel to it.
right.
And so I played around with the Hipstamatic app and played around with the packages, and this is the package I came up with. And then I spent a couple days wandering around and ended up, and this is I think in the old Muslim quarter, and was standing on the wall in a mosque and saw this and got one frame off, and that was it.
Cool. How do you feel about social? I mean, now that since we brought this up, like, what's your take on it? Do you find talent? I mean, you're not so much an a full-time editor anymore, but did you find talent through social media?
Oh yeah. I mean, when we were working at the National, we had very limited resources in terms of, because nobody knew us, so nobody was contacting us looking for work. And I was doing a lot of the foreign assignings, so I had to find people all over the world. And so basically any social media, we were, Facebook, there was a website I think called Find a Photographer. There was another website that I used. And I spent a lot of time going through places like that looking for people in certain parts of the world.
It's all about geolocation, especially when you're assigning for a newspaper, especially, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's like you need to get somebody that's close that can,
Any resource that you can access that makes your job easier and helps you find what it is you're looking to find.
Yeah.
It's a resource to be used. It doesn't matter whether it's social media or, even an old phone book.
Right.
Anything that's a resource is something to be used.
Right.
And, social media, I think, is a great way to do. I mean, I used it for my business, and I got business out of that.
Well, that's good. And what's big now? I don't know if you've even dabbled in it yet. Most people that are over 19 haven't, but Snapchat.
No, I haven't got into that.
That it's actually, I had to have my younger sister, who's in her low 20s, teach me and my wife how to use it, and I've been using it for about a year. You create these stories, essentially live stories that last for 24 hours, and I've begun following people and seeing how different people use it, and now the Washington Post has it, many different news outlets and photographers out in the field. So what's happening now, and also we're starting one up for Photo Brigade, so make sure to follow the Photo Brigade. But what we're going to be doing is passing it off, the account, to different photographers out in the field who are on assignment, who can essentially like show us in real time what they're doing, kind of give a little story of what it's like behind the scenes. National Geographic's doing it, showing like some of their biggest photographers out on so this is how I, stake out to try to get this whale shot, and so on and so forth. So there's really interesting ways. The White House does it even, so you can keep up on what President Obama.
I'm getting ready to do a road trip across the country, so maybe I'll look into that.
We'll pass the account over to you for a day or two. That's what we should do. Get you started on it. Social media, obviously, we all need to sort of learn how to make that work for us.
Well, it's not that hard to use. I mean, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, those are all fairly easy things to use. And
right.
It's just what it comes down to is making the time for yourself to use it.
Right.
It's like anything else in our business. You're a freelancer. You spend much less time actually shooting than you actually do on the business side of things.
Yeah, administrative work.
And, doing the social media is part of the administrative side of it. You
right.
just got to make the time to do it and make sure you do it.
Right. Absolutely. Totally true. So here at the end, we have a few of your sports photos. This is a while ago, isn't it?
Yeah, that would be, I think, 1995, 94.
Shooting film,
color neg.
Shooting hockey with
Kodak,
film.
Kodak 800 push to stop. 500 at an f2.8.
Now, was this before or after autofocus?
Because
I wasn't shooting back then, so I don't even know.
I think this was with electronic focusing, yeah.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine having to do the manual stuff.
Well, I mean, I did the manual before the EFs came in. I was, I started a long time ago. When I was in college, it was all Nikon F3s and, manual focus.
Shooting some Yankees. So were you shooting this for the Times?
No, I was shooting this for AP.
Okay, so this is before you started the
stuff.
Times.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeter looks so young in this photo.
I was lucky. I was there when Derek Jeter started his rookie year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And then some road racing.
Yeah, this is one of my commercial jobs. Every year in Dubai, there's a race called the Dubai 92, 92-kilometer race around Dubai, sponsored by Spinneys, one of the big local grocery chains. And once a month, they do build-up rides.
So were you doing this for the Spinneys?
Yeah, through their marketing company.
Yeah.
This
is some old NBA.
Yeah, it does John Stockton.
Yeah.
That's, again, for the AP, back at MSG.
And then the marathon, right? This is the New York City Marathon.
That was a picture that gave me nightmares for years.
How did you get that shot?
Well, we climbed to the very top of the tower of the Verrazano Bridge, and then
Was there a group of you or something, or were you pool or?
No, it was just a group. It was whoever. I mean, this is way before,
You probably can't do that now.
Pool. Oh no, it's actually what I've been told since is that they cut the access off. They don't let anybody up there anymore.
Right.
I think we were one of the last groups that went up there. But essentially, we went up to the roof of the tower, and there was a safety rail, maybe about 6 feet from the edge of and I climbed over the safety rail and just laid down on the pavement and stuck my head down over the edge of the tower.
And you're like, get me out of here.
Well, what they didn't tell you, which I found out while I was doing it, is that the tower sways.
Oh, God.
And so when the runners hit the tower, so I'm up there with a 24-millimeter lens looking straight down, and I'm already kind of freaked out as it is. And I had this Japanese photographer to the side of me, and he's freaking out. He starts kicking my leg, which is making me really agitated. But as they hit the bridge, you start moving forward, and you feel like you're going over the edge of the tower.
Oh, God.
And I really freaked out. And I had to pull myself back in and kind of catch my breath. And I was like, okay, you got to make this picture. So I crawled back out there, made the picture, and then got off. And, but I had nightmares for years after this picture.
From this shot? That's
yeah,
incredible.
absolutely.
Story behind the photo.
I've always had this, it's a recurring dream where I'm falling off the tower. And I've had it for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then some rugby and this guy.
Yeah, this was a commercial shoot. This was a new marine sailing club opened up at one of the resorts, and they hired me to come down and photograph a variety of activities and so forth.
Right. So let's basically talk about, as we end this, I think we've gone through everything now, the corporate end. So we've talked about your journalism work. We've talked about, your life and everything. I have found, being a freelancer myself over the past 10 years now, that it's always about trying to grow your be more what's the word, versatile. Yeah. God, I'm having like a brain fart on the word right now. But to have a bunch of different types of clients, not just diversity. That's the word. To not just have editorial clients, but also commercial clients. And a lot of commercial clients I met were clients that were like someone I met working for the Times. I shot something for the Times and so on. And so how do you get your commercial jobs? Do you approach them? Do they approach you? Do you meet them in some sort of situation?
Well, when I set up a shop in Dubai, I had a Rolodex from the newspaper because I used to contact a lot of the PR. I was in contact with a lot of the PR people in the UAE. So I just basically had that Rolodex, and I started cold calling people. And, the first year was slow. It took me time to get in. And once I started getting in, word of mouth started spreading.
Right.
And, eventually I built up a fairly good client base, but it was very diversified.
Right.
I was doing, besides doing sailing and sports, I was also doing corporate portraits, corporate headshots. I was doing architectural interiors. I was doing corporate events. Basically anything I get my hand on.
Yeah.
And, the one thing I'm always asked to this day is like, well, what do you specialize in? And I said, well, I specialize in everything. I'm an old AP photographer. I'm, started out in the 80s.
Yep.
And, when you were a newspaper AP, you
had
to be able to do everything.
Yeah.
You had to have lights. You had to set up a portrait. You had to be able to shoot sports, and it's often in the same day.
And turn it around quickly.
Yeah. The one thing that really irritates me as an editor, and I've heard this so many times over the last dozen years or so, is like, well, I only do portraits.
Yeah.
I only shoot sports. I only do this. I'm like, well, then what good are you to me? If I get a job at 8 o'clock in the morning and there's a building on fire, are you telling me you're not going to go because you don't do fires?
Right.
I'm not going to call you. You're not going you're not going on the list.
Right.
I need people who can do everything and do it well.
Yeah.
And that's I think the mistake that a lot of young photographers make today is they're like, I'm only going to be this, I'm only going to be that. Well,
there are
fine,
people
then
that,
you're limiting yourself.
There are people that feel that they need to specialize in one area and really master it. But I think I'm with you on the same page, where if you just do that, you're really limiting. You're not diverse.
I think,
limiting
you know,
the
when I
ability.
started out a long time ago, you know, the saying was, a photographer should be able to make a photograph with anything that you put in his hand. Okay, I mean that's why you probably did this when you were in college, make a pinhole camera. You know, I did it. I think the saying today is a photographer should be able to make a photograph out of any subject that stands in front of him. And if you sit there and say, well, I don't do that, then you're not a photographer, and you should get out of the business. You know, I mean, unless someone's paying you $1 million a day to run a studio and just do portraits, hey, good for you.
Yeah.
But for the wide majority of people out there, and especially in a place in New York, where every year there's 1,000 young freelancers that come into the city and want to, you know, end up freelancing, looking for a job. I mean, New York City is probably one of the toughest markets to be as a photographer.
Right.
And if you're going to try to make it in New York, you should be able to do everything.
Right.
Whatever an editor calls you up and asks you to do. Oh, do you do fashion shows? Yes. Can you photograph a frog sitting on a brick? Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
You know, can you do a 5-alarm fire up in Harlem? Yes. You know, because that's the only way. And I know this when I was assignment editor. You know, I wanted to see a diversified portfolio. I wanted to see that somebody could do a little bit of everything, because you always get in that situation where, oh, this job just come up and I don't have anybody. Okay, I'm going to call this guy, and I think he can do it. And the guy that says yes, even if he doesn't do a great job, as long as he makes me a photo, that's the guy I'm going to call a second time and a third time and a fourth time, because they're reliable. And I would say guy, but it really should be, you know, man, woman,
Shooter,
whatever,
yeah.
anybody. You know, anybody who can do the job is going to get hired the next time around. I mean,
Yeah.
I was talking, I ran into an old colleague in Athens on my way back here, and he was kind of like you. I mean, he was a freelancer, and I was the first guy that hired him at the Times. And he was relating to me the story. I think I called him 3 or 4 times before he was able to actually finally accept an assignment, because he was working for Bloomberg, and he was like, well, I was amazed that you were so persistent. And I was like, I was persistent because I knew you could do it, and I really wanted to get you on our side.
Right.
You know, those are the people you look for.
Right. Well, that's great. That's a great bit of advice there. And then lastly, what's next? What are your plans? You're just
Well, I just moved back to the States, so I'm in the process of looking for a job. And while I'm looking, I'm going to be basically just driving across country for a while. There's a lot of places in this country I've still yet to see. There's still a lot of Civil War battlefields, because I'm an amateur Civil War historian.
Cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so a lot of places I still want to go see, and just plan to go drive around, see some friends and family, and go camping,
Awesome.
and go to all the places I wanted to see. And at the same time, I mean, I've got my iPad, my laptop, my cell phone, so I can check the web every day and check my email. And
Kevin is available to shoot. Give him a call if you need him. Kevin, I really appreciate you coming and catching up with me. It's been like
been
we said,
great.
8 years or so since we've seen each other. Thank you all for coming and watching. I don't know if we made it through our Facebook Live. Oh wow, we actually did. That's
hey,
great.
I'm a first.
Yeah, you're our first. Anyhow, thanks again to Adorama for the use of their space. Thank you to Canon Professional Services for their support. Thank you, Kevin Larkin, for coming.
Oh, no problem.
We'll
Thank
see you
you.
next time, everybody. Take care.